this is the map we're going to be fighting over. I've got two objectives here. The first is the destruction of the enemy. The second is occupation of this yellowy green band around here, which is a ground objective. And obviously, if I want to have troops, it's just in that narrow band. I'm going to have to clean out the outside and everything around it so they don't get shot up. So at some point, I'm going to have to push up and get into that objective. The bad news is that I'm going to have to cross a river. There are some bridges, and the BMP-3s, for example, are amphibious, so they can swim across. But if we just change the angle slightly, we can see that I'm going to be attacking it into the face of a hill here. And I can expect all of the, well, pretty much the entire river. You can see there's quite a lot of open ground around near the river. Is going to be well covered. The BMPs might be amphibious, but they're going to be very slow in the river. Not only that, but they could very well potentially be exposing their top armour to incoming fire, or where they go down the quite steep slope into the river. They're going to be exposing their top armour, which doesn't have any of those ERA blocks on it. There are quite a lot of patches of woodland around as well, which can give cover and concealment to me and the enemy. There's a little village here at this intersection. That could be bad news, because I have to assume that everything forward of this red zone here, which is my deployment zone, could be occupied by the enemy. The deployment zone itself is in a reverse, on the reverse slope, so I can deploy. I'm not going to immediately get fired upon, but it also means that don't really have immediate eyes on what's going on elsewhere. So the real problem here, tactically speaking, I think, is going to be finding a way to advance into the objective in the face of a lot of enemy fire, given that they're going to have some good observation from the top of the hill, or around on the hills there. They've got a good slope to fight from, with some opportunity for some hull down positions. I'm going to have to advance in the face of that, do a river crossing, which is also going to be difficult, because we're going to be very vulnerable. And then at some point I'm going to have to clear out these woods in the middle here, which is going to be quite close range firing as well. I've got a lot of firepower going for me. I've got 10 of those BMP-3s, the 3 mortars with a shed load of ammunition. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be the infantry getting up close and personal with the enemy, which is going to kick them out of this area over here. So that's a broad look at the map. I do have some limited information on the enemy force. Some pre-game intelligence from whatever kind of source, previous reconnaissance or aerial or UAV, satellite, whatever. You can see from these icons here, these are suspected enemy units. We got infantry spread about, and that looks like it could be an armoured vehicle. Nothing concrete though. There may or may not be things there, and obviously there's bound to be other stuff hanging around. We can see they're all on the right hand side of the map. Most of them are up in this corner by the looks of it. Again, you can't be 100% sure here, but in general it looks as though they want to be holding on to the hill up here so they can put fire down, and in these woods so they have some cover and concealment. There's also a little speed bump here for either a bit of advanced warning or Maybe they're trying to be in defilade behind the trees so they can fire out at anything going across, approaching the river on either side. So bearing all that in mind, thinking about the ground and the enemy, what kind of options have I got to get up there, get into the objective and to destroy the enemy? This is probably going to be quite tough, I'd have thought, because there's a lot of open ground around and I'm going to have to cross that river, probably under some kind of enemy fire. The enemy's got a fairly dominant position up on the hills as well. But we can generally try and split my approaches down into 3. I can go up the left here, up the centre, or up the right. Taking a look at each one of these in turn, if we start off with the left, I've got quite a lot of cover going up, which could allow me to get quite far forward, though if there's infantry in this little copse of trees over here, I could probably expect them to be in here. Hopefully I'd be able to engage them without too much interference from other enemy forces if they're just up here. I've got a bridge to cross, or I can cross the river, but there's this great big crescent of open space here that I'd have to cross. And then on the other side, the entire other side up until the top of the crest of the hill here, the low crest, is totally open, and I'm going to be exposed to flanking fire from up on the hill and in the woods. And then once I get up to the top of the hill, there could be enemy reverse slope positions up here on the road. Some close range infantry with things like RPGs could make life very, very difficult. There's also not really much, still no cover from the enemy positions over here either. So that's going to require an excess of fire support and suppression. And there's going to be quite a few enemy targets up there, I'd expect. So I wouldn't expect that to be very effective. I'd also have to deal with those positions at some point, which is going to involve getting up close and personal with the infantry to make sure we've cleared it out, simply because it's a wooded area and the enemy can hide whatever they want in there. And if I come up on the left, I'm going to have to come round and attack over another chunk of open ground. There's another bridge to cross. I could go over the railway, I suppose, and get a little bit of cover, but also there could be enemy troops in there, and then I'd have to close assault the woods across another little, admittedly smaller chunk of open ground, but I think that would require, the left side is going to require excess fire support, really, to get it done. At night, might be worth giving a try, perhaps, but not at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a sunny day. Thinking about the middle approach, again on our side there's a few scraps of cover, though crossing from left to right across the railway tracks is some open ground which could get some fire from the hills, or enemy units in defilade in that little valley that the railway cutting. Again, there could be enemy troops in these woods here. We know that they've got there on our side of the river at some point. Parts of the bank are quite steep here. Like we'd already discussed, that could expose the top armour of the BMPs if they decide to cross the river. This bridge particularly, is quite narrow. And again, once we get onto the other side, we've got a big open space to deal with, and we're going to be assaulting up into those woods. with that, there's very little cover. We can get flanking fire from enemy forces on the left, on their right. Plus, potentially enemy forces shooting us in the back from these woods on here if we don't clear them out. And again, I think it's the same kind of thing as the left-hand flank, which is it's really too open for me to do very much with, given the conditions. If it was foggy, if it was night, perhaps, given that the Ukrainians don't have an overabundance of thermal imagery. So the middle and the left aren't looking very good. And that leaves us with the right-hand flank. Immediately we got the same kind of wooded area up to a certain point. We know we have this enemy position here, or we think we have this enemy position here in these woods. There's a village at this little intersection, there's a little hamlet, which could also have enemy troops inside, potentially. So we'd have to be clearing that out. We can get quite close up here though with the reverse slope and get some fire positions up. We've got this big open field that we'd have to cross. More open space, the river. We've got a bridge which at least is quite wide, but the bank isn't too bad around here. And we've got this, because of the slope of the hill here, this area is in this little chunk here on this side of the bank, is in defilade from enemy forces further at the top. Obviously if there's enemy in these woods here, we'd have to deal with that, put some fire down or whack them with the mortars. And even though this area is kind of exposed, well, very exposed to enemy forces in the woods here, the woods also serve to screen it off from any forces on the other side. So anything over here isn't going to be able to see through the woods to put fire down on us if we're over here. And that means that there's going to be fewer enemy positions to suppress, fewer positions to put fire down on to make it worthwhile. I'm not saying that it's easy, but it's looking more optimistic than a lot more optimistic than the other approaches. And of course then we can get the infantry have a much shorter assault route to get into those woods to get to grips with the enemy, if that's necessary, because that's also going to be a source of excess casualties. The inside right or the centre right approach, seeing as though we're on the right, also includes the village and this enemy position here. There is some potential for going across the river and straight into the woods here, on the basis that there's less ground to cover. But this is a frontal assault up here. I would expect there to be infantry with all kinds of nasty anti-tank weapons hanging around in those woods, which can attack the BMPs as they try to cross. There isn't really a bridge, if we're not going to be using that one, and it's exposed to flanking fire again from other enemy forces. So overall, we don't have an amazing selection of choices here. There's, I think, pushing up the far right, getting across the river up there, and then pushing up is probably the best, but it's the best of a very bad selection, I think. And I think what's this map is going to hinge on is my ability to gain some fire superiority to permit me to manoeuvre safely, or safer, and that's going to require a lot of fire from the BMP3s and the mortars. Luckily we got the drone, to help out with spotting the enemy. I think in general this could be very tough, despite the fact that it's up against the AI.